Alright guys, so you can see I have my clay on a sheet of parchment paper. I've got my other parchment paper here. I'm going to lay it on top. Now we're going to roll this out into a long rectangular slab for our mug. Alright, so start. You obviously aren't going to get the thickness that you want in one roll. And then pressing super hard isn't the way to roll it out either. You don't want to apply so much pressure that you create a dent in the middle or on the edges. Okay, so you're just going to take your time, roll this out, and then if you start to get wrinkles in your paper, unpeel it. And then it also helps to peel it from that side as well. Lay it back down, cover it back up. And continue rolling until you have a long rectangular slab. Alright guys, once you have your clay rolled out into a long oval shape, you can go ahead and open up one side of your paper clip, and this will be the side that you use to kind of create textures, but also to cut shapes out of. So since we're making a mug, you need something that is round. So I'm just going to use the top of this. If you have a cup, then you can use that, and you'll just place the cup on top and then trace along the edge there. If you have a cookie cutter, then you can go ahead and press down and pop that out. But if you have a cup or something that is not completely hollow, then you don't want to press that cup all the way down into the clay. It creates this kind of suction, and then you end up having to peel the clay out of the cup. So don't do that. So you're just going to put your template that you're going to use all the way to one edge, lightly go around. Alright, so now that you've got your circle traced, then you can go back and cut it all the way out of that clay. Alright. And just try to be gentle. You don't want to stretch the clay any more than you really need to. And you can just have the extra piece of parchment paper over here off to the side. And we'll leave that circle slab. That's going to be the base of your mug. So I'm just going to come right to the edge of my circle. And cut that extra clay off. Now since we're not using it, I'm going to put it back into a bag so that it doesn't dry out, okay? I'm just going to fold it over. I'm not squashing it up yet, okay? Just fold it over, put it in a bag, wrap it up, and set it off to the side. All right, so the next thing we need to do is make our rectangle with straight edges. All right, so let's say we make it 6 inches for right now. Actually, let's make it 5 because I want a couple of extra pieces of clay. So what I need to do is make sure, number one, that it's big enough to fit around the circle template. I'm pretty sure it's plenty, but you know, just make sure before you go any further. All right, so next clay is very, very soft. So do be gentle as you handle it. If it really starts to give you trouble, you can always cut down on the height of your clay. 5 inches is going to be a very large vessel. And all I'm doing now is laying the clay over the edge of my circle, just to make sure I have plenty of room to work with. Okay, so as long as there's an overlap and there's no big gaps down at the bottom, I know we're good as far as the length of that goes. You can unpeel it now. And now I'm ready to start scoring and slipping. So for that, I'm gonna need a little cup of water and my paper clip. So scoring, as most of you should remember from previous classes, but some of you might need a little refresher, you're just going to go through and basically scrape at the edges wherever you are going to attach a new piece of clay. I'm just making some marks, roughing up that surface a little bit, because together the scoring and the slipping, which includes the water, that's going to act like glue for these two pieces of clay. Alright, and then I'm going to attach it at the bottom, so I'm going to score the bottom of this longer slab of clay as well. You want to make sure you do a good job, because you don't want these pieces separating either while they're drying or while they're being fired in the kiln. Alright, so make sure you take your time and you actually follow these steps. Otherwise, your mug will break apart, and if it doesn't break apart, you'll be lucky if it actually holds any water or liquid. Okay, so I've got my scoring done. Here I am with the slip. Again, this is just water. I'm just running my finger along the edges where I've made the score marks. Alright, so again, remember this clay is very, very soft, so you do want to be careful as you pick it up and place it down. It does become easier to handle once you get it overlapped on itself. I'm just going to set that off to the side. A drier piece here. Alright. So now we have, I'm going around and just like lightly pressing and tapping those edges together. I'm not worried about blending it just yet. I want to get this side of the mug, the seam where that overlap is, I want to get that taken care of before I go through and start messing with the bottom edges there. So make sure your mug is fairly straight. There might be a couple of little bulges just because it is soft clay. It is hard to work with at times, especially when you're going vertically. All right, so where I have this overlap right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper clip and I'm going to go at an angle like this, all the way down. And I can pull that extra clay off, and this extra clay right here. Okay. All right, so now I need to connect these two pieces. So again, I'm going to score and slip. And the main thing that diagonal cut does is it lessens the amount of really thick clay right here at the seam. All right, and then you slip. Because remember what we said, if it's really thick, it won't dry as fast as the thinner parts. All right. And then I'm just working on pushing that clay together. Go ahead and use your finger and just kind of smooth out those seams. All right, so now that we've got that seam filled in, you guys can see it's very smooth now. You don't see much of an overlap or even a line where those were. And you can do the same thing all the way around. At the bottom, you're literally pushing clay, this is so soft, into those cracks, move it around, and really seal all of those edges and attachments that were made. Okay. Once you have those edges sealed, then you can go back and fix things in your mug that maybe are a little bit irregular. I would say be very careful of areas that look like they might be overworked. If they start to get very, very thin, that increases the amount of cracking. So instead of trying to fix every little thing, maybe think of ways that you can incorporate it into the design of your face and the facial features that you're going to put on this mug. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna try and shave some of that off and make it a little bit smoother. And then again, dip my fingers in water and smooth out this lip, like where if you do decide to use this as an actual drinking mug, which you can if you glaze it, if it's fired, once it dries and then you glaze it and then it's fired again, then it should be food safe. So you do want to make sure that there's not any of those hard edges where you could cut your lip on. Looks pretty good. All right, the last thing that I want to do today is to work on the seam that's down there at the bottom of the cup. A lot of times we know it's sealed on the outside here, okay? So it's not gonna leak. However, it is hard to get glaze into the very bottom unless you pour it. So what you can do to ensure that you have more of like a rounded bottom is just take some of your leftover clay, roll it into a coil. Again, this needs to be even all the way across. You don't want it to be really thick or really thin in one spot. Again, it's going to be about the width of a pencil. The coil. Alright, and again, this is just meant to fill in the cracks down there, and there's enough water and loose clay in there that I don't need to necessarily score in there, but I am going to score this coil here. Just to kind of help it attach itself to the bottom of that mug. This is probably one of the more frustrating parts because it is difficult to get your hands down there. But you can use, well, I've included a large popsicle stick that should be able to reach down in there. That's good for smoothing things out inside. You can also use, maybe like a plastic spoon or the end of like the handle of some silverware or something like that. It usually has a rounded edge. Anything that you can stick down there to really like smooth this coil out is going to be a good thing. All right, so I'm just going to use a little bit extra water because the coils, the more that you handle them, the faster that they will dry out. So I put a little extra in there just to keep them wet. And I'm just using this large popsicle stick to push the coil into the corners there, trying to keep the scored part lined up with the edge. So I've got a little bit extra clay in there that I don't need. I'll use my handy dandy paper clip and pull that out. All right, so now I'm gonna just take my popsicle stick and I'm going in and just smoothing that clay out. You can dip it in water. That helps really push the clay into the corners there. And you kind of create this curved ramp, I guess, instead of an actual hard seam or corner where liquid can find its way inside of your cup. Be careful when you are working this way, because if you lean your clay this way, it's going to create kind of a rounded edge. So try to hold it in the palm of your hand and then just rotate it as you go. And make sure that you have accompanying pressure on the outside edge. You don't want to accidentally poke your popsicle stick through the bottom. So you can see now the inside corners at the bottom edge are cleared out. They're kind of like a ramp, right? So I'm gonna let this set up and dry up a little bit. I don't want to leave it out for days and days and days because it will harden. But I do want it to harden a little bit so that it stiffens up, and when I apply the facial features, it won't sag underneath the weight of that extra clay that's on the walls. So make any last final adjustments and then come back and check on your clay. And you still want it to be soft. You just don't want it to be so soft that you can't pick it up without altering it too much. All right. So we'll just leave this out and we'll see when we get to a good consistency.